when the sky is high. No reason to stay on ground. Lift your hands and you can touch and fly.
Hello and welcome to the Aviatrix Book Review. I'm Liz Booker. This month, in honor of Black History Month, the Aviatrix Book Club discussed A Pair of Wings, a novel based on the life of Bessie Coleman by Carol Hobson. The book incorporates the rich historical context in which Bessie pursued her dream to fly. You can find my interview with Carol from last July, when the book first launched, on the Aviatrix Book Review website, podcast, and YouTube channel. My guest today was among the first African-American female flight attendants, stewardesses as they were called then, to fly with Delta Airlines, and has also incorporated this rich history in her books. She chronicles her adventures and misadventures and those of her fellow cabin crew pioneers in her book Stars in the Sky, Stories of the First African-American Flight Attendants. Her second book, Stars and Beyond, Stories of Black Heroes in Aviation, is a collection of short biographies of Black pioneers throughout history for both adults and younger readers. And for the little ones, she has an activity book, Stars and Beyond, Color Your Way to Black Heroes in the Sky. She is the host of the Fly Girl radio show on Blog Talk Radio, and she led the effort to designate February 16th as International Black Aviation Day, or IBAD, which celebrated its first observance this month in 2022. You can find her at her website, theflygirl10.net, and on social media at Casey Grant. Casey Grant, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I'm excited.
And I'm excited to have you. I'm great. Thank you. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into all of the things that you're doing.
Okay, great. Well, I am Casey Grant, as you said. I flew for Delta for 35 years. Backing up, my father was in the Air Force. I started school in England. I lived in Tripoli, North Africa. And my stories of that is Gaddafi was there, gearing up for all of his fame that later everyone knew. We were introduced to Gaddafi way back then. As a matter of fact, we were evacuated. He wanted Americans out, and we had to leave our fathers behind and get out of Africa. So that's an exciting start of my life of remembering anything. And so, yeah. And so I always wanted to travel. And at that point, I was going to join the service. And that was the only way I knew that I could really see the world. And I was working at the University of Illinois in the president's office. And my boss said to me, you should become a flight attendant, because the person that had just left before me had gone to Delta. So therefore she was into the Delta family and interest of it. And so he had come home for a vacation and he interviewed me at lunch. And he said to me, when you go back to the office, you tell Fran you're putting in your 2 weeks notice. And so he went back and he had all the paperwork sent to me. And that was the beginning of my venture of becoming a stewardess, which is what I was back then in 71.
Amazing. And we're going to talk about your books and your story more in depth when we get to those. But you have a more recent victory to share that I was so excited for you about, which is the International Blacks in Aviation Day. Tell me about that project. How do you get something like that out there? How did that work?
I'm still on cloud 20. I'm not even on cloud 9. I'm so excited, and the response has been just overwhelming, and the support. I went back through my emails the other day to find out, when did I first come up with this idea? And it was in about April or May. I decided I wanted a day to honor all the Black pioneers in aviation. And that has become my passion since I retired, to tell the story, and so much so the flight attendant story, because the Black flight attendants have never been represented in movies, documentaries or anything. And I thought we did a big part. We had a big part of aviation history, and no one knows that. No one recognizes it. So my passion started then. And so I said, we need a day to honor all Black contributions, because in doing the research for my first book, which is Stars in the Sky, I learned so much I didn't even know about. And so I just got turned on to Black aviation history. So therefore, this is how I brainstormed and came up with International Black Aviation Day. And the acronym is IBAD. And
I know, I love it. I love it.
IBAD. I love that. And so from there, I was going to create a calendar. So this is how it all started. And I did create a calendar. And I have it a whole month, designated in all the highlights of different pioneers. So with that, it became a mission of getting the government involved. The congresswoman here, I got a proclamation from them. Albany, Georgia is where my mother was from. And they took it and just went wild with it. And got proclamation from the mayor and a resolution from Congress.
That's incredible. And so what work did you have to do to make that happen? That just is amazing to me.
I have been blessed with a lot of good angels that have helped me, because as I said, I created the calendar, and any interview that I've had from that point on, I always mentioned it. And I have just been able to get the word out. And I've been trying to get my second book, which is Stars and Beyond, Stories of Black Pioneers in Aviation. I was working with the school system, trying to get them to take the books, add it to their curriculum, and get the word out to the young, our youth at that point. So that is what I have been doing since May, contacting all the different people that I know, sending out letters, different correspondence, and so forth. So the media has been a part of it. And I was so fortunate that MSNBC announced it, which I keep playing that back over and over and over.
Oh, I played it a couple times too. I was so excited to see that. I was like, you go, girl. That was so great.
Yes.
So so this was the first year, and obviously it's new and clearly a great splash this year. How do you see it being celebrated in future years? Because I have visions of my own. I want to hear how you see that in the future.
And I'd like to hear yours to see if they tag along with mine. Definitely in the school system. Albany, Alice Coachman Elementary School purchased books for all the students for February the 16th, because that is the actual day of International Black Aviation Day. And we're going to just make it and say IBAD from now on. IBAD is celebrated February the 16th. My goal is all this year, what I will be doing is contacting superintendents in all states and trying to get them to order the books so the children will have time to read it and be prepared to honor one Black pioneer or several February the 16th. So once it's in the school system, Jack and Jill has also I do an event in April with Jack and Jill, which is a prestigious organization. And so these are the type of things, Jack and Jill, in any type of organization, any exposure that I can get in front of the youth, this is what my whole year is going to be. And there's a musical. That first book, Stars in the Sky, as we speak, is being formatted for an off-Broadway or a on-Broadway musical. So that's another avenue that this is going to get out.
How fun is that? That's so exciting.
I told you I'm on cloud 20.
Well, I mean, I personally think it should be a movie, but.
Well, my goal is a movie is wonderful, but if you're on Netflix or one of those other type of avenues, it reaches more people. So my thing is I want it to be a series. I don't want it to be just one thing.
Okay. Actually, you certainly have enough to fill a series with all your stories, for sure.
Exactly.
A good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, so many fun things happening. Yeah, so the school stuff, like the kids especially, I'm super excited to hear that, because that's what I was thinking. You've got your museums too, like you've got the Smithsonian and all of the aviation museums. And then, what was I thinking? Oh, like you've got OBAP involved, and Sisters of the Skies, and all the other groups, Women in Aviation International, and
Yes.
99s, what's your, I saw in your book you talked about sort of the organization that you guys created, but it kind of fell to the wayside. Is there a flight attendant like organization that includes everybody?
That includes everyone.
Yeah,
Uh,
like is it just airline specific, or do you guys have like an overarching organization?
we do and we don't have an organization like that. Windy City Wings is one that was created here in Chicago. And I belong to that, and that's all of us, the flight attendants. And so that's an organization. The Black organization is Black Flight Attendants of America, Inc. And that one was created back in the 70s. So I don't really know how the membership is like with that, but that's an organization. I think that we probably should come up with an international IBAD organization so that
Yeah,
everybody could, yeah. So who knows where we go? It's so many different avenues that this is going to stretch to.
I love it. And then you also have the airlines, obviously, that you get on board with celebrating too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they have different flight attendant conferences and or aviation conferences that I love to attend and be a part of.
Well, I just love all of it. I love that you're getting all that representation out there in the public so that everybody knows their history and then can see who's doing it today, because these circles seem to like be a little nuclear. You guys swirl around each other because that's comfortable, but then, and obviously you focus on outreach to people of color, but like getting it out to everybody so that they can understand the history and
Absolutely, because it is history. It is
yeah,
African American history, but it is history. And it is a
correct.
very important part of aviation. I love to tell the story that we have our own Wright brothers. And this is in Robbins, Illinois, and people in Chicago didn't even know it. And Robbins is from where I live downtown, probably about 45 minutes away. And so the first Black-owned airstrip, the first Black-owned aviation school was there. And the two men built the airplane because they weren't allowed to go to the white school, the aviation school. So they took a job as a janitor, listened to the lectures, then collected all the information from the garbage, the trash that night, and they would study. And they taught themselves how to fly, and they built an airplane, and it flew. So those are our Wright brothers, Coffee and Robinson. Those are the black African American Wright brothers.
And you got your African American Amelia too, and all of whom had to
That's
work so hard to be able to fly. Yeah, and Bessie's story. We discussed the book A Pair of Wings by Carol Hobson this month in the book club, which is
yes,
fabulous, and it incorporates all this history that you talk about both in your book, or your book. They're both your books, but the
yeah,
book about your life and then in the history too. I love that.
yes, yes.
Well, so let's start with Stars in the Sky, which is your memoir. Tell us about it.
Stars in the Sky is an interesting book because it tells the history, my life, and it also gives everyone an insight of what the Black flight attendant stewardesses, what we went through. And it starts with training from having to weigh only, and I confessed to Delta the other day, made it public, that actually I wasn't supposed to get the job because I was a quarter of a pound overweight. I weighed 120.
That was
And had she weighed
crazy.
that quarter of a pound,
And how tall are you?
5'4".
Okay, I'm 5'4" too, and yeah, that's a tough weight to hold.
And, and it doesn't make any difference at that point how old you were. So at 20, I had to weigh the same thing at 65, 70. They changed it, of course. So anyway, it tells the history of training, getting through that, all the different racial situations that I had to live through. And the book was therapeutic because there were a lot of things, and I didn't realize how emotional I became and other people when I made them remember. And the disgraceful things that we had to go through that we never told. I always want to make sure I tell that Delta never knew half of the things that we went through. We kept it amongst ourselves, and we encouraged each other and kept each other strong as we held our heads high. but the racism was something that we had to deal with, but we wanted the job and we knew we could do it, and we did it, and we did it with pride.
And it sounds like it. Reading the book, you guys, first of all, the thing that you captured so well is just that sense of glamour. And
Oh,
talking about, I mean, obviously you, and then I saw the pictures of all of you. You were so beautiful.
so
You still are beautiful, of course.
thank you. But yes, those days, that's when we were the high heels and we carved the rack of lamb or the beef in front of the customers. And as Delta's motto back then was, serve, treat each customer as if they were a guest in your home. And that is exactly how we did it. And that's why we had such a wonderful reputation for the friendliness of all the flight attendants, because we loved our job. We were young and we were just adventurous. And this was such a thrill.
I was thrilled reading it. It just sounded so fun. And you know, through this project over the past year, I come from a military background, and I had air crew who I have the utmost respect for, who were an integral part of our flights. And so I certainly had, you know, an understanding of that relationship. But through this project, reading a lot more about the airline industry and mostly pilot books so far, this is our first book where we get to focus on the cabin crew. I have just gained such a deeper appreciation for what's going on back there. So much respect for you guys. And so impressed with the kind of the pioneers and what you went through to make it work together.
Exactly. And not all the, in my book, there's a lot of things. It takes you from my very first trip to, as I said, the thing that it just kind of brought back old memories of the degrading things like having to stand under a light just to make sure the cab driver could see that I was Black, and to give me enough time that when he refused to pick me up, I had to go back upstairs because we didn't have cell phones then, and to be able to call and not be late for the trip. But there's also murder, mystery, and the hardships of being a stewardess. So it was glamorous and it was fun. But one of our co-workers was murdered, and we didn't know what happened to her for 20 years. Her mother, no one knew. So it's the yin and the yang of being a stewardess. It was the wonderful times, it was the hardships, it was the loneliness, and not everyone can be a flight attendant or a stewardess. You have to have a different and a very strong personality to make it, because you're dealing with people you don't know and you're going to strange cities. And so we all grew up together. And Chicago based, we had racial problems, but all in all, we are still a family. And the flight attendants, we still stay in contact with us, all of us. And so not everyone was bad and not all situations were bad.
Yeah. Well, I think you really captured that because I was along for the ride on the ups and downs, both in the book. And hearing you talk about it, first of all, I wanted to say it was clear to me, and you made it very clear about how, you know, you just talked about you have to kind of be a resilient person and somebody who can take care of themselves in you know, unknown places, strange places. And obviously your life as a military child living overseas, I think really prepared you for that adaptability, and also gave you that kind of desire to keep going.
Yes.
And then there were lots of times when I laughed out loud in this book, and we'll talk about a couple of those in a minute. But the one thing that you really drove home was just that, like you just talked about being a Black woman, doing everything the right way, being prepared for your flight, getting up early in the morning and calling a cab like you're going to be there on time, and then having cab drivers not being willing to pick you up, hotels not be willing to let you have a room at night, or treating you like absolutely like a second class citizen in those situations, and then not being able to find housing wherever you were assigned. I just, you know, I'm not naive, but wow, you went through a lot.
Wow. And that's the effect. That's the wow factor of the book, because people take things for granted and we have all forgotten, or we never even thought of it. A lot of people were like, oh, they had no idea. I can always tell who's read my book because the comments are always the same. When you've read it and digested it, you come back and you say the same thing. So I know the fakers and the shakers that say, "Oh yeah, I've read it." No, you haven't, because there's things in there that you go, "I never knew that." Yeah. That happened to you. And then people apologize because you realize the things that we had to go through that really was very unkind.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's some fun stories in there too about partying in Miami and meeting glamorous people and all that stuff. You clearly enjoyed all that, right?
You know what? If you had 5 wishes in the world, one of them should be that you get to hang with a bunch of flight attendants on a personal level, have some wine, and listen to their stories, because we have some fabulous stories and memories that are just people just don't have. I mean, I have been in the presence with Jimmy Carter, President Carter, President Obama, Michelle Obama, and to be able to talk to him as a one-on-one. How many people have had that as a common person? You know?
No kidding.
Yeah. So I am Bill Clinton, President Clinton. So I act like I know him, you know, Bill and Hillary. But they make you feel like you are just, you know, on their level. So it's been a wonderful life. I've had a wonderful, wonderful life.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Makes me want to go get a job as a flight attendant if I hadn't been on enough aircraft to see how poorly people behave sometimes. Speaking of which, one of those stories, I was laughing out loud. I know, you know, probably wasn't funny in the moment for you, but just gives a little taste. Don't tell us the whole story about this lady who lost her mind on a plane.
Oh my goodness. Well, I know the part that you laughed out loud, because when I wrote it, I laughed. When we were laughing when it was happening, though. So that is something. And that one particular situation that I know is we did have a passenger that we had to restrain. We were trying to restrain her. And we called for a doctor, medical assistance. So when we got the medical assistance and we were the doctor said, "We need some medication. We need to medicate her." I thought we were whispering. This is in first class. But the response from everybody in first class is enough to make you always laugh. And I'm not going to give it away, because at that point, I need everyone to get the book to read it, because the response from first class is something that we did not expect. We even laughed. And so we did. We got the medication. We were able to medicate her. And that was in the 80s. And that was when I was attacked on the airplane in the 80s. So these people, the flight attendants that's being attacked now, it didn't happen as often as is happening now, but I was attacked, and my arm still goes numb because of the injury that I sustained from that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, you know, while that story was funny, I'm not sure I want to deal with that. I'd love to do the travel, but without that hassle, my goodness.
No, you don't want that. No one wants it. It shouldn't be. That's not the professionalism of the job.
And you know, you bring up like what's happening now. I thought it was also like, when did you publish this? In 17?
14.
14?
Yeah.
I thought it was prophetic the way you included a section in there about, you know, the H1N1 and then like the potential Ebola and all these things that affect, you know, air travel. And that's obviously we've seen that happen. And then now we're seeing the after effects of it as, you know, flight attendants are having to deal with belligerent customers who don't want to wear the
Isn't
mask.
it true? Yeah. We never knew what pandemic was.
No, it's crazy. Well,
Yes.
then I want to talk about this other book too, Stars and Beyond, Stories of Black Heroes in Aviation, which I loved also. So your book is wonderful. It starts off with the history of blacks in aviation in general, and then the history of, you know, the early flight attendants who were kind of your peers, really, and then your memoir. But this one is little collection of biographies of people throughout Black history, starting in the early days. What else do you have to say about it?
Yes, and this is the book that I am encouraging the school system to incorporate into their curriculum. The first book is for aviation enthusiasts, for young adults, because there's some scenes in there. I think I make it colorful, but I think that you do get the point of what I'm talking about.
I thought that was very well done, actually. It was clear what you were trying to say.
Okay, great, thank you. And I tried very hard.
Without being crass.
Yes, exactly. And I didn't want my book in any way to be, for those who don't know, but Coffee, Tea, or Me, that book was just not a good representation of what we were about. And I did not want that at all. But these are some of the things that we did. So with that being said, it's really a good book, gives you a great insight on aviation from a perspective of being a Black stewardess / flight attendant. The red book, my Stars and Beyond, Stories of Black Pioneers, I highlighted everyone from Betsy Coleman to an astronaut to an astronomer. And these are people who have contributed important things in aviation that you just don't know. And I don't think that I am being incorrect when I say this is a book that aren't that many out there that has a collection of so many people in one book. Most of them.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
No, absolutely. So there are a lot of collections. I have never seen anything like this that is specifically focused on people of color, that covers so many. And you've got contemporary friends in there too, like people who are still flying right now.
Exactly. Absolutely. Our first male flight attendant for Delta Airlines, he still is flying, Eugene Hardman. So yes, he's still flying. So yeah. And I also tried to name the very first male and female captains and everything for all airlines, as many as I could collect to give them honor.
Well, that must have been super fun. Tell me about doing the research for that.
You know, this is a story. When I started writing Stars in the Sky, which is the first one, I sat down and I just wrote, because that's what I had been told to do. So don't try to have any order, just write. And we can go into more details when we get to that segment of encouraging other people to write. But the research, you read and you read, and then you research and you get more information. It was so entertaining. And it was just a high. It was just so exciting to learn things that I had not known. And I did not like history, believe me, when I was in school. So it's not as though I've been a history buff. I hated history. It was boring. But the research.
Let me say, I have said several times through this project, I was not a history person either. But since I started this project and have been reading history through the lens of women in aviation, it has become far more fascinating to me. And it's because of that connection, right? Like you identify with the people who were going and their experiences. And so it opens up the rest of their context and their history to you in a way that if you just read, facts on a page, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. And I think that because you had to have, it was a test and you had to know dates. I think that was one of the things. You couldn't enjoy the story. You couldn't enjoy their journey because you were too cut. So I think that's another reason why history was so boring and I didn't retain a lot. So
you and me both. So I have a couple of questions for you about the selection process for who went in. Like, how did you make decisions about who you're going to put in there?
Wow. Almost everybody I found was interesting, and everyone had their place, and everyone was able to be put in the book. Of course, it was the first, so I was able to limit that. I put in the first of every one in the different departments. So therefore, that made it very interesting and selective. And after that, I just, like the pilot, the balloonist, I didn't even know that there was, I think he's an aeronaut or something, but I didn't know that they got licensed for that and blah, blah, blah. And he owns his own company and everything else. So he was very interesting when I stumbled up on it. And so people of interest, definitely being the first in that particular field. And that is how they got in the book.
Yeah. And I wanted to know if you have any favorites.
Do I? Well, Bessie Coleman, of course, is my favorite. The inspiration, the fortitude of this young lady, not even knowing how to speak French. And so you go to night class and you have to cram. Then you go there, you have to read, you have to take an exam, which is very hard. and you have to take an exam and then learn how to fly in the barrier, the language barrier. So she'll always be my hero. And so Bessie Coleman definitely is the first. One of the other ladies that was interesting to me in the book, and everyone needs to read, all my books are available on Amazon, Kindle, and Barnes and Noble, but how the call button was originated. And this woman was an inventor. She was like the second African American to apply for a patent. But she started off just inventing one thing, which has led to another. And now it's the principle of the call light on the airplane. And so she had to definitely go in there because she was a part of aviation. And even though flight attendants hate the call button, it is a very important, instrument on the airplane. So yeah, so that was just all just so interesting, so interesting. I love intelligence, and people who have done all these things. These are really intelligent people.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I'm finding the same thing too. The more that I learn, or the more people I'm exposed to, the more fascinated. There's so many stories out there, and I'm really enthusiastic and hopeful that more women like you who have these experiences will share them in writing. I mean, I just think that there's a power in a book, because
Yes.
there's a permanence in it. I mean, we have lots of great social media and stuff, and things can flash by, but there's just something special in my heart about a book and the time that you take to immerse yourself in somebody
Yes.
else's world, and accessing those parts of your brain that you probably don't have time to access when you scroll through Instagram. You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
so
I
ladies,
totally-
write your stories.
Yes, please, 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 Anchor. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot of dedication to do that, because it's many, many days of writing and thinking and cross-examination and references. And so it's a full-time job.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in just a minute. You have some other stuff going on. I listened to a couple of interviews with you on is it the Fly Girl Show?
Yes, the Fly Girl Show.
Where do we find it?
Blog Talk Radio. And I created that from the extension of the books, because there were so many stories, like you just said. How did I select? Well, those people were chosen for this particular book, but I also wanted to bring in all the other people I could not include in the book, or that I had just discovered. And so that's what the Fly Girl Show on Blog Talk Radio is, why I created that. And I have been able to interview some very, very interesting people. And it's not all aviation. So I opened it up to other fields. One of the people that comes to my mind is the cousin of Emmett Till. And we know that history keeps resurfacing about the young man that was brutally murdered. And his cousin was actually in the house the night the men came in, and they approached him first. So he could have been the one that was tortured and murdered. So that's a part of what Blog Talk, the Fly Girl Show, is all about. Interesting facts, including aviation, but in life, that we need to have exposed. And so that was the creation of that. And then I continue with my history, lecturing, going to my book signings all over. Pandemic, of course, kind of put a damper on that, but love to think that that's coming back up. And you mentioned the museum. My artifacts, my first uniform and my books is in the History and Cultural Museum in Washington, D.C.
Wonderful.
So we're waiting for that to go on display. And I just have just been speaking to them that possibly because of the pandemic, they might do a virtual. But they came in and packed up all of our stuff. It was so impressive and energizing and exciting. And so I am logged in, my information plus the very first Black flight attendant for Delta, who's Patricia Grace Murphy, her uniform, some of her things too. And Eugene Harmon, his artifacts are there too. So we're just waiting to be on display in the museum. So yes, but I need to, and we'll concentrate on getting around to all the other Black museums throughout the country.
That's so cool. Well, you're going to keep us updated on that on social media and elsewhere. And where can
Yeah.
we find you?
I am on, well, Facebook. And then my website is theflygirl.com. I'm sorry, it's theflygirl10.com. So theflygirl10.com. So they can kind of stay up on what I'm doing. I try to update it for the book signings and different things. And as I said, the musical is easy for you to remember and to follow. It's called Stars in the Sky Musical.com.
Okay.
Starsintheskymusical.com. And so please stay in contact with that to see the progress of that. We already have a movie star that wants to be in the musical. She wants a speaking part, not singing. So we are moving forward and starting soon to do the reading, and it's just exciting. It's
all so exciting and so energizing.
Yes.
Were there any other things that you wanted to share before we get into the writing?
I don't think so. I think I've pretty much given them a mouthful of information.
Well, I will just reemphasize what a great book. Stars in, well, both of the books are fabulous, but for children, middle grade readers, young adults, and adults to learn this history, Stars and Beyond, Stories of Black Heroes in Aviation. And the thing that we didn't mention is for younger friends, you have an activity book.
Yes, and thank you. Yeah, we did kind of, and that one is called Stars and Beyond, Color Your Way to Black Aviation History. And it's formatted for the younger children. But on one side of the page, you're going to read the history, a little bio of the person, and it's going to have 2 questions that you can ask. So I call this my educational entertainment, and this is the actual word, edutainment, which is education and entertainment, and it is a word in the dictionary, so I didn't make it up. So it kind of is interactive, and you're able to make copies of the right page, which is a coloring page of the person that I'm highlighting. So the children get to hear, you read the story, they get to learn about it, then they get their own personal coloring page of that particular person that they're learning. And there's a glossary, because I did not want to limit the educational level. I wanted children to learn, no matter what age, one word, if nothing else, you can learn a new big word. And so yes, it's the coloring book. And as I said, all of them are on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, and that's another great way for teachers to incorporate this history on iPad on February 16th, right?
Absolutely. They'll be well prepared for next year, which I believe will be a big, big occasion. Delta has already said to me that they would rent out the theater for one night for the Delta employees for the musical.
Oh, that's great.
So they have been very supportive. Their diversity team has been very supportive of IBAD. And so we're going to stay in contact, and that's going to be exciting. So all Delta employees will have a night on Delta that they can come to the musical. So that's really encouraging and exciting.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing. And it's going to be a full house. I'm sure of it.
I will keep my fingers crossed. I'll be, yes, excited. You know what? If my family is there and we get to sit there and they just entertain us, I'm going to say, thank you, God. It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So well, I think a few people might come. I think
you might have a few more than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Casey, this has been so great. We're going to shift into talking about writing, which we'll go into a different video. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time and for your work and for bringing all this stuff out for everybody to see it, shining the light on it.
I thank you for the interview. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.